Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the More Than You See podcast, where I have meaningful conversations with creatives about their mental health journeys. Please note, I am not a licensed practitioner or therapist, but an actor and a filmmaker who is deeply interested in sharing my own struggles and exploring the mental health of others. My hope is that these conversations bring you some joy, some personal understanding, and some tools so that you can build your own mental health toolbox. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Season 5 of the podcast. I am so excited about my guest today, Brad Rushing, who is a cinematographer. You've probably seen some of his work. He's had movies that have been in the top 1, top 5, top 10 on Netflix and HBO and many other platforms for the past few years. I got introduced to him in a few different ways over the past couple years because of his work, and he is such an incredible, bright spirit. And when he reached out to me actually about being on the podcast and talking about his own mental health journey, I was so excited to have him because he shared with me how multidisciplinary he is and how much his identity as an artist really defines him. So not only is he a director of photography, a cinematographer, he is also a very talented musician. On this episode, we talk all about how he shifts between his cinematography and his writing and song making, and how, he really has embraced his identity. That was one of the biggest takeaways of this episode, was how unapologetically he is himself. And I know that for myself, this is certainly something that I struggle with all the time. It's really hard to just embrace who we are 200%. And he is someone who has. And I think that it was really inspiring. And he brought up some really important points about how, if you aren't exactly who you are, you're not going to attract the people who should be aligned with you, and you're going to attract incorrect people into your life. Like we talked a lot about, finding your group of people, figuring out what your identity is, being confident in yourself. And I know that I certainly learned some lessons on this episode, and I hope that you do as well. So without further ado, here is my interview with Brad Rushing. How are you doing today?
Hi. How are you doing? Good evening, good morning, good whatever time it is to whomever is watching.
That's right. Yeah. So I don't know if you've ever heard my podcast before, but I really like to start people and have them do like a real check-in with themselves. So like, how are you feeling? How are you actually doing? Like what's sitting on you today or not? Maybe you feel fantastic.
You know that saying about the guy who goes to his doctor and he says, "Doctor, it hurts so much when I hit myself in the head with a hammer." And the doctor goes, "Well, why do you do it?" "Well, because it feels so good when I stop." So
Right.
that's a dad joke, but it's like that. I mean,
Yeah.
as we record this, we are coming out the other side of one of the longest strikes, probably the longest strike
Yep.
in the history of the film industry. And it's just driven me to madness, and so
I'm
many
sure.
other people. And I came into it having already been wrestling with some personal traumas. So I was, off on a stumbling as I came into it, and it was just ridiculous. And I
Yeah.
mean, there were times when I felt it would literally destroy me. And that's why I kind of threw myself into the music.
Yeah.
And I decided that I had to, I mean, I'm not content to just lay down and be dissolved. And I thought, I have to learn something. I'm paying such a price that I have to evolve into a better version of myself
Yeah.
and learn whatever there is to learn. And so, things have not returned to the idyllic equilibrium, but I feel like we're coming out the other side. I can
For
see
sure.
light at the end of the tunnel. I've evolved in my strategies and my priorities. I feel like I did indeed learn things. I was thinking just the other morning, I was still had kind of that momentum of depression and anxiety. But
Yeah.
then I looked back and I looked at the things that I had done in that downtime, the music, some of the projects I've worked on. And I thought, if I had been in normal mode, I wouldn't have had time to
That's right.
do all of those things. I wouldn't have been present here in Houston, which is where I am at the moment, to participate in some of these projects that have been very special to me for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
And I feel like as that uncomfortable emotional resonance recedes into the past,
Yeah.
that I'm going to be very pleased with the choices I made. I mean, I'm still kind of battered and bruised, but
Yeah.
I'm feeling hopeful.
That's great. Yeah. So, for people who have never met you before or, watched it, you've got some incredible YouTube videos. Or you've been interviewed on YouTube a few times, different movie maker podcasts. And so you are a DP primarily, a very talented DP. And I wanted to, first of all, so you touched on it a little bit before, but like one of the things that I admire about you, not just the fact that you have such a wide range of projects that you work on, but you also work with the same people over and over and over again, which I think is so incredible because in this industry, which can feel so isolating and so lonely and, backstabby, there's so many negative aspects of this industry. You found your crew that are just like the people that you work with over and over again. And I, would like to ask, how did you settle in on those people? And if you remember a time before that, how your state of being and your mental health has shifted from working maybe with a bunch of other people to like working with your team and like this is
Right.
your group.
Well, what you express is actually a bit of an illusion because
Sure.
I mean, it's like we are traveling carnies,
Mhm.
and I don't always work with the same people all the time on everything, but we're in this pool and we mix it up.
Yeah,
And in New York, I work with my New York people again. I'm in Houston, I work with my Houston people. I'm in LA. I've been fortunate to work all over the world, and I've always been good at staying in contact with people and being friendly. Social media has facilitated that in an unprecedented way.
for sure.
I mean, everybody I have ever known is potentially present.
Yeah,
My family in Canada, my friends all over the world, it's extraordinary. And in terms of how you find your people, look, I am very averse to judge or vilify anyone. I mean, you have to work really hard and be sort of an intentional asshole to warrant me putting you in that category.
for
The
sure.
way I look at it is it's alignment. It's like
Mhm.
we each have ways we like to work. We have values, we have priorities, we have integrity and ethics. We have a level of commitment to the work, obsession in my case. And, it's not for me to say that somebody who's differently aligned is bad or wrong. We're just not, we're not going to be a good dance couple.
For sure.
So it's important to find people who are just as mad as you are.
Yeah,
And being somebody who is multidisciplinary, those are the people that excite me the most. So many
absolutely.
of my friends who are filmmakers, they're also artists or writers or musicians or a combination. And even if it's not the arts, it can be some kind of a discipline where they're really passionate. And if somebody is that way about something, even if that discipline doesn't innately interest me, they can make it interesting because
For
of
sure.
who they are.
Yeah,
And so it's really just it's just as I've gone through life making my mistakes and learning my lessons, I've always been a very friendly person, which is funny
yeah.
because I'm an incredible introvert. People don't
Mhm.
realize that. I had to overcome that to be
Yeah,
successful in this business, but in my heart, I'm incredibly shy.
yeah,
But I do love having people around. And so, you find the people who, when you're in their presence, there's no effort, and,
yeah,
and what I mean by that is everything flows. It's like you're
yep,
not having to be polite or watch the way that you're verbalizing. You're not have to worry about being misunderstood or misunderstanding. You don't have to worry that you're each going to have a different level of commitment to the task at hand,
Right.
and when you find those people, it's just like friends and relationships. You
Yeah.
hold on to them and you nurture it.
Yeah.
And, that
Absolutely.
when you talk about the time before, there's no hard and fast delineation of that. I mean, when
Mm.
I look back, it's so funny because I've learned a lot of things about myself the past few years that I wasn't present to in my conscious mind, but I see looking back that there's this consistency of who I am. There are these, nascent versions of what I have consciously become, choices that I made, awarenesses, things that at the time were incredibly puzzling to me, but now make sense. And so I think that a big, big part of this and being successful and happy in life is being brave enough to be authentic.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is that if you're truly yourself, if you speak your mind and your heart, hopefully you come from a kind place. But
Mhm.
if you are truly expressed and generous, you're going to repel some people because again, I'm not judging, but that's just not how their minds and hearts work. So they're
Right.
going to go away. And you have to be okay with that because it can hurt, but you're also going to attract your kindred spirits by
Yeah.
being yourself.
Absolutely.
If you put up a facade or a pretense, it works in a very bad way because you repel the right people and attract the wrong people.
Right.
So that authenticity and that generosity and that intention and that self-awareness of like, I'm being me
Yeah.
and being me in a polite and kind way, but I'm being me and we'll vibe or we won't vibe, no judgment.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's that's really interesting, and I think that speaks so much about. I loved what you were saying about the multidisciplinary and multi-hyphenates, because I think that people also who have so many different creative aspects of themselves, I feel like they don't have time for bullshit or to be
You're
mean,
so right.
It's just like
It's wasted.
exactly. Exactly. And so, I want to talk about you being multi-hyphenate. You're an incredible musician. You shared some songs with me and they were so good and it was so interesting. I would love to be able to share them with the audience. And it's so interesting how, again, that those as well span genres in such a big way. And so I would love for you to, share a little bit about getting into music, because that's an entirely different career path for some, but
One
you've
would
blended
think,
them
yeah.
so well. So yeah, tell us about that.
Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you, because I'm very proud of it, is
Yeah.
you got this much bandwidth of the diversity. It's like
I'm
this.
sure. I'm
I mean,
sure.
there's electronic, there's heavy metal, there's country. I mean, I just
That's
did something
incredible.
that's bossa nova, like Henry Mancini. Because I've never wanted to be like an artist, so I don't need
Mhm.
an identity. I do whatever I want.
Hmm.
And the funny thing is
Hey,
the
can you
music.
I want you to talk about that a little bit more.
Okay.
So you don't feel the need to have an identity as an artist, so you've just been able to open yourself up and kind of just be you. So what would you say, like, do you have an identity? What would you say describe your identity?
Authenticity. I mean, look, I'm just discovering me.
For
Somebody
sure.
who's younger than me might look at me and go, "What the hell's wrong with you? You haven't got it figured out." But I'm learning things about myself that I never knew all the time. And I'm the one thing that I've always done. There's this great quote in this letter from Agnes DeMille to Martha Graham, which we can look it up later and I'll send it to you.
Mm-hmm.
But the final line is saying, because it's all about being conflicted about your creativity and overthinking. And at the end, she says, no artist is ever pleased. Your voice is yours and yours alone. And it's only your responsibility to keep the channel open.
Yeah.
And it's keep the channel open. I don't overthink. I mean, so many of my lyrics are stream of consciousness. If I started
Mhm.
thinking about it in that moment, I would screw it up and I would clog it.
For sure.
When I'm on the set lighting a movie, like if somebody asked me to explain what I was doing, my mind would break because it's
Yeah.
at this point, it's needs to be red, that needs to be darker. It's just, it's present. And maybe it's
Yeah.
because I've done it for so long. And, one of the things, they say a lot of learning is actually unlearning,
Mm-hmm.
removing all of the detritus,
Yep.
the rumination and the overthinking, and just clear all that shit.
Yep.
And what's there? Like
Right.
what's here? There's this great quote where somebody is asking a sculptor, like, how did you make that beautiful and amazing figure? And they said, I just removed the parts that didn't belong.
Mhm. I love
And
that.
it's that. I mean, sometimes I surprise myself. I'm like, I don't know, like it just, there it is. So,
Yeah.
it's, and so that's what I indulge in. And I just let it manifest in the way it manifests. I'm not sitting there going, I'm a rock guy and I'm only going to write rock because it's
Right.
like, that doesn't say, why? I don't want to. I don't care. Same with movies.
For sure.
When I got on the Christmas streak, people are like, you're the Christmas movie guy. And I'm like, no, I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm like, now I'm going to do a horror movie just to show you.
Yeah. Right.
And, but if you look at my website, it's intentionally, like I literally went and I'm like, I don't want people to see a consistent pattern. I mean,
Mm.
yes, there's, some intention and stylistic choices that I favor, but like, I don't want them to go and it's like, oh, this is the guy who does that thing.
Yep.
Because first of all, as soon as that thing goes out of fashion, you're straight out of work.
Right.
But also it's like one of the things I love about the creative industry and I love about these crews and traveling is that every day is something different.
Mm-hmm.
Every project, whether it's a movie or a song or a group of people, it's something completely, I've never done that before. And that
Yeah.
is like, you're always reinventing and re-leveling up into some new dimension.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. But of course you had to have the expertise in order to then be able to let go of the reins and kind of just let your
Sure.
muse take control.
Yeah.
So how long have you been doing music?
Longer than filmmaking.
Amazing. That's great.
Yeah.
That's so
So
cool.
so so my first creative impulses was fine art. Like I, as a kid, was drawing. I just loved to
Mm.
draw. And my mom would tell us stories, and I just remember she would read to us. And I loved, visuals and just I had such an incredible imagination that, it sometimes was disadvantageous because I'd be the daydreaming kid and the kid who other kids thought was stuck up because I was lost in my own reveries as opposed to paying attention to them. And I learned that out very belatedly. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that they had perceived that. I just thought anyway. But
Yeah.
but then in my teens, I discovered rock and roll and music and, there'd always been music in my house. And I just thought that looks like fun. And I started playing and I've never from the beginning had an impulse to be a live musician. I've always been kind of Dr. Frankenstein. I'm like, let's write this song. And when I got my first multi-track recorder and I was just, because that's the other thing you talk about people who don't have the same level of commitment.
Mm-hmm.
This is the 80s. There is no Fiverr and
Right.
and there is no internet. So if you don't have somebody who lives around you who plays drums and bass, you're out of luck.
Right.
And if those people aren't serious, if they want to screw around and then, you know, go misbehave or slag off, you're just screwed. And that's why I decided and a number of people in my generation are like, okay, I'm gonna learn bass. I'm gonna learn keys. I'm like, I will be my own backup.
Right.
And
Just
you
in
have
case.
then you have the multi-track and you're like, you're just building it up. And it's just this beautiful thing where you have this idea and you start with just a guitar and a vocal. And then all of a sudden there's a bass and there's a drums and there's keys
Mm-hmm.
and there's horns. And it's like, holy shit, it's a real song. And
Yeah.
so, I did that up to the point where, I did a couple of professional recordings on 24 track tape. And then I moved to Los Angeles to pursue filmmaking. And I thought, well, I'll pause the music just long enough to get some really aggressive momentum in my career.
Yeah.
I never achieved the level of momentum I imagined. And
Right.
during the pandemic, we're all sitting around with a lot of time, and I'm like, I'm going to digitize those old multi-track sessions.
Mm.
And then I dug up these old lyrics, and all of a sudden it all came back, and I'm like, well, I'm going to finish some of these, and then
Yeah.
I'm going to write new ones, and then I'm talking to my director friends, editor friends, and they're like, oh, I would use that in a movie, and
Mm.
everybody suddenly, that's when you discover everybody's hidden talents, and now you're collaborating, and then
Right.
there's Fiverr, and you can go on Fiverr and get a string section and a theremin and a choir, and holy mother of God, it's the most amazing thing in the world.
So biggest takeaway, Fiverr. That's the most amazing.
No, it's one of many things. I mean,
Yeah.
so here's another amazing thing. This is something that blows my mind and it came out of my deep depression is I have reached out to people who are heroes of mine,
Mm.
session players who played with people like David Bowie and John Lennon and George Harrison and and just on a whim, I'm like, they're gonna tell me no, but I'm gonna ask them. I'm like, would you play? And
Mhm.
holy shit, they did. They do. And I'm
Wow.
like, you have these amazing people. And in my mind, it's kind of like collecting autographs, but at a whole other level.
100%.
So
Well,
I don't see that Fiverr's any more awesome than that,
of
or
course.
playing with my friends with
Yeah.
secret skills. That to me, they're different pillars. They're each like, that's awesome, and that's awesome, and that's awesome.
For sure. No, I mean, and it's incredible and such a great reminder of just asking and the
Yes.
importance of just putting yourself out there, which I think is really difficult, especially for an introvert and especially for someone who struggles with depression, which, I want to talk about next. Like for you, that's something that you haven't talked much about openly, at least as far as what I've seen from your social media presence, because that's how I mostly know you. And so, number one, thank you for wanting to talk about it because I think that it's so important. And that's, the goal of this podcast is to really encourage public figures at every
Yeah.
level to open up about what's going on. So, yeah, like is this something that you struggled with as a child or is this something that has been more recent or what's the background on that?
No, it's been all my life, and the one thing I want to say in terms of the social media, like I'm not an especially private person.
Mhm.
I don't really have secrets, and
Mhm.
I mean I am willing to own my the lesser parts of me because that's part of me, and I
Yeah,
also want in a lot of the interviews you allude to online, I consciously was like, I don't want to make myself look so superhuman that what I do is inaccessible to others.
for sure.
I want them to say, look, this is a person who's complicated and has baggage. And if they can do it, maybe I can do it.
Absolutely. That's the
That's
goal. Yeah.
that's been a choice. But I want to keep it positive. So the social
Mhm.
media, I'm again, even though it comes out of the depression, I'm thinking of the other people who feel like me, and I want to put light and love and
Absolutely.
hopefulness out there. I don't want to just beat them up with me feeling bad and they feel bad. And what's the point? I mean,
Right.
I'll
Agreed.
commiserate with people. And from time to time, I do make posts that are a little more forthcoming. But it's so funny because I one of the things that I've done while I was in Houston was I started going through old notebooks and I found these lyrics and these songs that I had written when I was 15, 16. And oh my God, I could have written them today. I mean, it's
Mhm.
like the hopefulness is there, the cheekiness is there, the darkness and the loneliness and the alienation. I've always had a sense of being very different from other people. Part of it is my imagination. Part of it,
Mhm.
I only learned a couple of years ago. I took the Myers-Briggs test and found out I was INFJ.
Mhm.
So for those who know what that means, it's like apparently the rarest type.
Uh-huh.
And, I usually don't go in for those tests. I think they're bullshit. But when I started reading everything, I was like, oh, well, this is my lost instruction manual. This is
For
what I
sure.
should have had when I was 16 years old and
Yep.
trying to figure out why I'm so different than all the other bears.
Yeah.
And so, I've just thought I was broken. I thought they put you on the wrong planet. They dropped you on your head. You have such different values and perceptions. And again, there's no judgment. I don't think I'm
Right.
right or good. And a lot of the times it's been difficult and it's been painful, but I've always, the one thing I'm like, I've got, like the song, I've got to be me. So
Yeah.
all I've got, I'm not going to bullshit. And if me is like way over here, then I just have to own that.
Yeah.
And so there's been sadness, and I'm a very literal person, and I am really unable to, like, people who talk with, I'm sorry, insinuations and innuendo, and it, it's like if somebody wants me to know something, they literally have to tell me.
Yeah.
Like, I dated a girl once who used to get so mad at me because she's like, "Can't you tell? Like, I've been hinting at this." Or I'm like, "No, I can't. I can't. You have to
Just
tell
tell
me."
me. Right.
Because it's not me being spiteful. I'm literally blind. And when I was in
Yep.
my 20s and teens, friends would be like, "Hey, that girl's flirting with you." I'm like, never in my life have I
Yeah.
ever perceived anyone flirting with me, even though people
Yeah.
said they did. I don't perceive it, and I don't know how to flirt back. And so unless, this is what I mean by finding your people, unless I
Hmm.
have people who will speak literally to me and listen. And when I say something, there's no subtext. People who
Hmm.
go hunting for hidden meaning and the things I say are on a fool's errand. And there are people who are so certain that it exists. And I'm like, the energy of trying to deal with setting them right is horrible.
Right.
So I mean, I just can't. I can't. I have
No,
to
of
be
course not.
people who believe and trust what I say and take it at face value. And if something's objectionable or confusing, they'll express that in clear language.
Yeah.
But that's been a tremendous source of frustration because I feel like a lot of people speak in a way that I don't understand,
Hmm.
and they
Well,
hear me in ways that are not what I intend.
yeah. I mean, we all want to be understood at our
Yeah.
core.
And the other thing is that I'm sort of a ridiculously generous and kind-hearted person, and you know,
I have
pe-
heard that about you.
people who are deceptive assume other people are deceptive. People who are
Right.
manipulative assume other people are manipulative. People who are open and kind assume others are open and kind. And you can imagine when those types collide, there are sparks and
Hmm.
unfortunate things happen. And so again, like I trust people and I trust
Hmm.
that they're honest. And I've been so brokenhearted at times. I mean, it's okay for people to not get along. It's okay for
For sure.
people to be friends or in a relationship and that time passes. That's okay. But there are kind and honest ways to arrive at that juncture and proceed. And then there are people who are just different than that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's all of those things. And it's just because I feel that the way I am is such an anomaly. I mean, that's the way it
Yeah.
feels. I mean, maybe everybody feels that way, but it's just incredibly lonely at times.
Yeah.
And I just am like, I just wish I had people. I wish that my people would take me back to the planet that I was meant to be.
Rapid fire questions. First question: what has been your favorite age so far?
Age of civilization or age of myself?
No one's ever asked that. So, I mean, you can choose either.
Context is so important.
That's true.
Um,
Wait.
I'm going to answer both. I think my favorite
Great.
age of civilization was, post World War II into the 70s
Mhm.
when, people were bouncing back from all that privation and struggle. And there was so much inspiration with the promise of the space age and peace and love. And just, I was born into that and grew up at the tail end of it, and it just was such a hopeful time. And as a
Mhm.
kid, we dreamed of living in those space stations that Stanley Kubrick promised us, and going to the moon, and watching Star Trek, where everyone is treated with equality and respect. It's so funny because people often ask me, what's your favorite movie or favorite artist or favorite song? It's hard for me to just pick a global catch all, but I will tell you, in terms of hopefulness,
Hmm.
my favorite age was my 30s.
Hmm.
Because that was a point where I really felt that I had knowledge and momentum and skills and just possibility in abundance.
Yeah,
My favorite age of enlightenment is today.
that's great. I love
And
it.
I maybe a little more road worn and a little further along. But I mean, in some ways, I understand things a lot less. But I
Sure.
suppose most importantly, I understand myself a lot better. I understand what kind of people and situations I sync best with. So I think I'm prepared to make a lot better choices. And one of the things that I learned in the past few years was to be able to prioritize myself, because I have always been somebody who tended to put other people first. And when that first dawned on me, it seemed like an incredibly selfish thing. And I still kind of have that resistance. But you get yourself into a circumstance where everybody's got somebody else's back and nobody, including you's got your back.
Right.
That becomes a wake up call. And then the other thing I think is balance. I've realized just kind of in all things, because I can tend to be a workaholic and
For
I
sure.
can tend to be like obsessively passionate about things and drive people crazy and wear myself out. So
Right.
balance. So anyway, so there's a very long answer to a very short question.
That's okay. That's great. Are you a night in person or a night out person?
Again, a bit of both.
Yeah.
I I was born and raised in the suburbs.
Uh-huh.
So, a little bit city and a little bit country. And I just feel like I don't want to pick a lane, even with, artistic styles, films, music. Anytime somebody says, "Oh, you're the guy who does this," I want to just make a sharp turn. And there are times when I just love staying in with friends, or even staying in by myself and working on a project or music, or I seldom take recreational time. I should do that more. My
Yeah.
recreational time looks like I'm working or creating something. But I like tonight, for instance, I believe I'm going to go out and see some friends at a film mixer. And
Nice.
it's important. It's
It is.
good it's good to get into the world of three-dimensional people.
It is. Final question for rapid fire questions. What was your last impulse buy?
Gosh, my last impulse buy. I'm certain that it was music related, because
Great.
with the film industry slowed down, I've been doing so much music stuff. It's probably something very unspectacular, like a effect plugin. I can't.
Amazing.
I will say this. So let me just. I'll give you the good answer is, during the Black Friday and Christmas sales, I snapped up some music software. That I'm one of those people that even with Amazon, my parents, they grew up during World War II, and they really passed along that sense of you gotta find the bargains. And so
Right.
I'll just, things that I don't need right away, I'll sort of hover them and track them. And then the minute they go on sale, I'm like, snap, snap, snap. So
For sure.
so
I get
that's
it.
that's really, I just went bargain shopping for some really cool music and audio stuff, really good
That's
plugin software.
that's awesome. Do you find, because I know that for myself as an actor, I mean, I do a lot of things. I'm an actor and a writer and a producer. So I do many, many things, but the certain universal feeling when you finish a project and that relief that you feel, but also that immediate crash as
Uh-huh.
far as, either like the terror of not knowing what's next or the loneliness of not being surrounded by that group of people, the anticipation of what might come in the future, but you just don't know. Like there's so many things that happen at the end of every job. And you have worked, fairly consistently over the past few years. So I'm sure that you've actually had a lot of ups and a lot of downs. And
Yeah.
I'm curious how you've been able to manage that for yourself and kind of like maintain a foundation for yourself?
I used to have those ups and downs a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
but I think one of the things that attenuates it for me has been things like the music,
Hmm.
because I'm dovetailing. I mean, it's like this
Right.
ends and that now moves into focus.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
because that movie wrapped, now I'm doing this music. Now I'm helping this friend with this project. And I feel like if somebody said to me, Brad, how do you keep from going insane? How do you deal with the depression? Is like when I have things that I'm creating, I guess it's almost like children. I don't have children, but if you had
Mm-hmm.
children, it'd be like, in spite of what's going on with you, you have a responsibility
Right.
to show up and be bigger. And so it is with creating something. It's like I committed to doing this and I have to, it doesn't matter if I feel like shit. I mean, some days I'm just not inspired and I have to be okay with that. But for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, I'm like, I need to show up for the things that I said are important to me.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's creating a structure in life where you're not just like I said, when I told you about this past 7 months or so, when I was like, I felt like shit for so long, but I'm
Yeah.
like, wait, I showed up, I did these things. I mean, when I look back in 10 years, I probably won't remember the way I felt so much, but all of this music and the film projects and all of that will still exist and the lessons I learned. So I think, no matter how bad you feel is that, that you're never in a space, you know, between things that hold you up, that
Yeah.
you're always, and something like music is self-generated. If
Right.
all you're depending on is movies, for the most part, those aren't self-generated,
Yep.
not the ones that pay your living.
Right.
And so I guess you could do shorts. I mean, if that's what you can self-generate, but I think self-generating creativity, keeping some semblance of a schedule, having a to-do list. Because if I had nothing on my to-do list and I felt like crap, I don't know what I would do.
Yeah. Absolutely. One of the things I like to focus on in this podcast is like the different masks that we wear depending upon who we're with or what we're doing. I mean, especially actors certainly have that, but I'm wondering if that's something that you struggle with where you feel like you have different masks that you wear depending upon the company that you're with or
I
what you're
alluded
working
I
on.
alluded to this before when I spoke of authenticity.
Yeah,
I've never had a tolerance for that. I mean,
that's
and
great.
and when I've had to, like, you're speaking to somebody and you've got to clean up your language, or I mean, look, if it's little kids and stuff, that I respect that. But
Right,
like in the company of adults, I just don't want to be in a space where I can't be myself. And sometimes you have to, I
right.
guess, you have to go to court or something. But I just make the choices to be around the people and be in the circumstances where I can be myself.
Mhm. Where do
You
you
know,
think you got such confidence?
honestly, when
Yeah.
I had this epiphany very recently.
Mhm.
When I was very young, I realized how much I didn't fit in. I didn't
Mhm.
fit in so much that it was hopeless that I would ever fit in. So I just didn't try.
Hmm.
It's just that
Hmm.
honesty. I'm like, I'm so different than all of you people that there's just absolutely no possibility. And again, it's not to say I didn't get along with people. I mean, you get
Yeah,
even people you don't have a lot in common with, you can have an intersection, right?
absolutely.
But in terms of your tribe, in terms of the kindred spirits, like I was very much on the outside and I would get a little bit with this group and a little bit with that group. And the first time that I was with my people was when I went to art school at the High School for
Mhm.
Performing and Visual Arts. And demographically, it was disparate. There was all kinds of cultural backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds, all kinds of sexual orientations. But they were more the same of me than the homogenous suburbs, because those weren't me, even though
Right.
maybe I am that demographic biologically, but those were not my people. Again, I
Was
have friends in that zone,
of
but we
course.
don't have the same kind of connection and energy and conversations that I have with all of the people at art school and all of the people in the creative community. And so, I do have a very strong awareness And everybody's invited. Again, I don't judge people, exclude them. But if somebody wants to be in my circle, they have to take me unfiltered.
Yeah. Is that something that you think your parents helped you with, or what are they like as far as?
My parents, who've passed, unfortunately, were incredibly supportive. I mean, I had the kind of parents who said you could do anything you want.
Hmm.
And I mean, look, nobody in this world is perfect. We're all learning as we go. So I don't
Yeah.
want you to have, the idea that everything was a panacea. But once they passed away and I told people how much I missed them and why I missed them, I was shocked by how many people said, I wish I had had parents like that.
Yeah.
I thought my parents were the norm. I thought that was the average. Everybody was, the Cleavers and the Cunninghams and the Cosbys. But no, it's like apparently most people have very difficult relationships with their parents. And had a very good relationship with my
Hmm.
parents. So,
Well, I
you know,
think just, I mean, again, like your strong sense of self and your confidence in that sense of self is really inspiring, because I think that, so many of us even now still struggle with that, as adults. And I think that, like, it's not about, like you were saying, like, you're constantly growing and learning and evolving into who you are. Like, we all are, absolutely. But, like, just your confidence and, like, whoever you evolve to be is perfectly fucking fantastic. Like, that's awesome.
well, look, I'm glad you see it as confidence. To me, it's almost a resignation. It's like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to be any
Hmm.
good at being anything other than me. So fuck it. I'm going to be 200 proof me. Right.
Yeah.
And what's the point in trying to be anybody else? Because that other person is a better version of themselves than you'll ever be.
Right.
So like we can only be the best version of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think we have to make the choices of who are we, what is important. Again, I always emphasize kindness and compassion to others. I mean, that needs to be at people's core, I think, for this society and any society to work. But inside of that, and this is something I struggle with and am learning, we also have to have kindness and compassion towards ourselves.
Yeah.
And so all I can be is me. And I just have never in my life, it's just like you said before, when you're multidisciplinary, you don't have time for the bullshit. I don't have time for the pretense. I don't have
Yeah.
time to pretend to be something I'm not. Because if you are pretending to be something you're not, you're making the wrong friends and getting the wrong opportunities because that's not you.
Right.
Right? I mean,
Mhm.
for better or worse, if I'm me, I'm scaring away what's meant to be scared away and attracting what's meant to be attracted, regardless of how. I mean, sometimes the things you scare away, it can be hurtful. And, believe me, honestly, there's so many times that things have gone away that made me so sad. But also in years hence, looking back, I was like, oh, it was for the best. It
Right.
makes sense now in context many years later. And even like, sometimes you say, if you could go back, what would you not do? What would you
Mhm.
change? As much as it pains me, nothing, because
Yeah.
those hard lessons made everything else possible. So
100%.
so some of the great people I've met and some of the great opportunities are very certainly because I got my ass kicked at some point, figuratively or literally.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I never asked that question because I feel the same. I feel like, there's so many painful experiences that we have in the past that make our current experience, worthwhile. Like, I think that, it's so important to look at both the darkness and the light in something, because only then can you actually see what's going on, and you can see the contrast and see what you've learned and how you've grown and all of that.
Well, I also think that that's generous and relatable because if we
For sure.
present as perfect to other people, like then we become inaccessible. There is that facade to present
Right.
as being perfect is the facade. If you say, look, I'm this, I'm dark and light, I'm, good and not quite so good. And I've got this shit tight and this, I'm such a bumbling mess, even though they may be bumbling messes and ninjas at other things, now you're relatable and they can be comfortable being themselves. Because that's the other thing. If you're too perfect, the other person's gonna be like, oh, well, I don't want to say anything because, well, you're
For
just,
sure.
you're up in the pantheon of gods and I'm just this humble peasant.
Yeah. So two final questions. First one is what are you excited about in the future? Like what's coming up for you?
Well, I'm shocked that the island is now on its 23rd day at number one.
Yeah.
That between Sean Piccinino, the director, and I, that's our
Mhm.
fifth number one in 5 years. And then I have one other number one that I did with a director named Matthew Conan and Marvista that was on Tubi this
Uh-huh.
past, which I've submitted to the Canadian Society of Cinematographers Awards. We'll see how that goes. So I hope, the hope is always that those will be a catalyst for opportunity. I've got the song Just Call on Me, which Lilia Kasil, a Ukrainian singer, sings lead on. And you're
Mhm.
welcome to share those with
Okay,
your
great.
people. That is releasing on February 24th. You can get a Spotify pre-save, come to my social media, and then I'll give you the scoop. I haven't said this to anybody else, but I have another one
Great.
releasing on March 23rd. So I'm going to try, because I have this incredible backlog. They have to be mixed. I'm going to
Yeah.
try to do one a month, so that I did a horror movie last year called The Movers with a director named Giorgio Serafini, my producer buddy, Jamie Thompson,
Mhm.
and it stars Christopher Lloyd, Jenna Malone, Terrence Howard, Tom Everett Scott,
Hmm.
and a guy named Grant Feely, who was Luke in the Obi-Wan series.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so I'm super excited for that to come out. I did a television special with Erica Wernick, who's
Hmm.
like this
I love
amazing.
Erica.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I
Mhm.
did her TV special meant for this, which we just wrapped post on. And I'm so
Yeah.
excited because it looks and sounds like a million bucks. But more importantly is I think it's going to make, like, everybody who's seen it is just moved to tears. And
Yeah.
anything that helps people access their best self, I'm all in.
Yeah.
So those are the things that are coming. I'm always working on more music. I was literally recording before this. I'm always creating and doing. I'm going to go to that networking event, and who knows who I'll meet. So, there's just a lot of momentum. And I guess I would love to get, that going again in terms of the immediacy of film work. My personal life has been in a bit of turmoil, and I would love to get that sorted as well.
Mhm.
I'm not in such a hurry that I want to, populate it with the wrong people. That's a
Yeah.
lesson I've learned. So, patience is another thing I struggle with. That could
Yeah.
be a podcast.
Yeah. Well, this might come into the answer for your last question. The last question is really like, do you have any tools or things that you do to remind yourself that it's all going to be okay when you're in a depressive time? Like,
No, I
what do you
don't.
do?
I don't. I have hopelessness. I
Mm,
really literally have the great yawning abyss of hopelessness. But like I choose to embrace the things I commit to. I mean, I think that's probably a theme with me. I know that in that very popular YouTube podcast that people like to watch, I said that I had, at one point in my career, I had lost faith in myself and I didn't believe in myself. And I
mm,
said, well, I don't have to believe in myself. I have to do the things I committed to do, and that's it. And
no
and
matter
and, and
what.
I feel so it would be lovely to feel hopeful in all the time.
Right.
But to me, if I commit to things, if I commit to people, if I commit to projects, then it's dots. And I just have to connect the dots, even if I
Mm,
feel like shit, because you know what? No matter what, I am not going to be the reason that I fail.
yeah.
No matter
Well, I think
how, no matter
that
how
is
hard,
your tool. Your
no matter,
tool is having to continuously pushing yourself forward,
yeah,
constantly having things on your plate to pull you through to the next dot.
yeah. No matter what happens, I'm not going to be the reason things go sideways. There's so many things in the world acting in that regard, and I'm not going to be a part of it. If I go down, I'm going to go down flaming, fighting, screaming. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just going to resist, and so that's what I mean by, even when I personally feel hopeless, if there's something outside myself. Also, contributing to others. Like one
Mm-hmm.
of these helps me a lot when I'm depressed is helping others feel better.
Yeah.
And because I'm like, okay, I can't help you, Brad. You're a fucking lost cause, but I can help this person.
Yeah.
And just being of value, being, I don't go with that intention, but when I look back on it, it's like all of this is me needing to feel that I have something to contribute, that I can be
Yeah.
of value to somebody or something, be it a film or a song or you or your
Mhm.
viewers, friend.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. I'm so glad we were able to do this, and it's just so fun to see everyone's perspectives on themselves, on the world, on the industry. And yeah, it's just been a real pleasure to chat with you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you again so much for listening to this podcast. What did you think about this episode with Brad? Because I still feel like my mind has been blown. Like I mentioned in the intro, I think that his unapologeticness when it comes to who he is really inspiring. And it's something that I am going to be thinking about for a while and going to strive to just be as confident in himself, in myself as he is. Another big takeaway for me was the way that he constantly has something else on deck that's creative, even if it's not necessarily the thing that makes him money. Like he is known as a cinematographer, and that is what his, that's how he makes his living. But always having his music and other aspects of creativity have enabled him to get through difficult times and provide markers for him to continue moving himself forward. And that's something that I have certainly tried to do. This podcast is actually one of those things for me, but it was just such an important reminder why that's important and why that's important for our mental health. That being said, I would like to give a huge shout out to my amazing friend and assistant and editor of this podcast, Katra Parkman, as well as Ryan Ricks, who is the composer of this music. I would also like to ask, if you are not following the podcast, please subscribe, please share, please give us, a rating if it's something that you've enjoyed. It really does help spread the word of mouth. So I just really appreciate you being a part of the community and helping me do that. Please remember that you and everyone around you is more than you see. Thank you so much for listening, and I really look forward to us chatting again in a few weeks.